Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Morty and Glory video. In today's episode we are going to be taking a look at the best upgrade you can give to your Imperial Guard battle tanks. Am I talking about armored tracks? I am not. Am I talking about hunter killer missiles? Ha ha ha! No way, Jose. I am of course talking about the mighty Heavy Stubber. And so without further ado, let's get on that 50 and dive right into today's episode. When John Browning invented his 50 cal machine gun towards the end of World War I wonder if he knew it was still going to be used by humanity's fighting forces all the way into the 41st millennium. And I have to admit, it's this old school cool that really endears me towards the Heavy Stubber. It's just such a badass gun. There's nothing complicated about it. It is the Imperial Guard made manifest. There's no fancy warp trickery here. There's no mind-bending technology. It's just a big old heavy machine gun that's going to spit out some big old bullets. And this kind of leads me on to one of the first reasons why you should be considering Stubbers on your vehicles. The rule of cool, the most important rule in Warhammer 40k. I mean, it is just a well-established scientific fact that by putting a Heavy Stubber on one of your vehicles, you will increase its cool factor by 150%. This is backed up by hard data, and it is not just a statistic that I have made up on the spot right now. It also allows you to, quote, Black Hawk down aggressively and continuously in every single game of 40k that you play. And if you're not grabbing your 3 dice with gusto and screaming, get on that 50 every single time that you roll your shots for your Heavy Stubber, are you even playing 40k, bro? Now, for many of you, that argument is enough. I've convinced you. You're going to go out to eBay, you're going to buy loads of Heavy Stubbers, or you're going to go to your bits box and find anything that looks vaguely like a machine gun and stick it on top of your Leman Russ and your Chimeras. But there might be 1 or 2 players out there that would like me to present a more serious argument. So I will do my level best to actually give you a proper reason for why you should be considering Heavy Stubbers on your vehicles. And actually, the argument is pretty simple. It's all to do with born soldiers and being able to auto-wound your opponent. Now, I understand that on the surface, the Heavy Stubber looks like a little bit of a bad weapon. You're paying 5 points for what essentially amounts to 3 extra bolter shots. For those of you that don't know how the Heavy Stubber works, it's an extra gun you can buy for your Leman Russes and other vehicles in the Imperial Guard motor pool, and it has the following profile. It's got a range of 36 inches, it's heavy 3, it's strength 4, it's AP nothing, and it does 1 damage. Now, at this basic level, the Heavy Stubber isn't really much of a threat. Sure, it's got a pretty good range, and that complements a lot of the other weapons you can put on your Russ, like your Heavy Bolters and the Executioner Plasma that lots and lots of people are running these days. But really, adding in a few extra bolter shots to a tank here and there doesn't seem like it's really worth it. But analysing the Heavy Stubber in this vacuum does it a great disservice. Because you're not looking at a weapon that's going to fire 3 shots. You're looking at a weapon that's on a very durable platform. A platform that more often than not is going to survive the course of the game. And more often than not is going to be able to fire multiple times over the course of every game of 40k that you play. Now, I have a little rule here, which is I average out that a Heavy Stubber gets to fire 4 times each game. The reason I say 4 times, even though there are 5 turns in a game, is there's always going to be 1 turn where something doesn't happen. Maybe you get the first turn, you need to play it cagey with the Leman Russ. Maybe there's a turn where you need to advance the tank instead. Maybe the Leman Russ just dies a little bit earlier in one game than the other. But on average, you'll find that that Stubber will get to fire about 4 times each game. Suddenly, you're not paying 5 points for 3 shots. You're paying 5 points for an average of 12 shots. Now, if you've got born soldiers, that translates into paying 5 points for 2 auto wounds every single game. That might not seem like much, but it's a really good deal. Even if you just take 1 Stubber in your army, if you're firing it at its intended preferred target, which is light infantry, And there are quite a lot of light infantry scuttling around the game these days. I mean, Guard is one of the most popular factions in the competitive scene right now. At some point in a tournament, you're going to face Guard v Guard. At some point, your Stubber is going to be able to take down enemy Guardsmen or Kazakin. Now, when you're facing off against light infantry, typically they've got something like a 5+ save, or at best a 4+ save. Now, we're not even taking into account the regular wounds that the Stubber does. We're just looking at the auto wounds for now. If you do 2 auto wounds in a Guard v Guard game, you are going to more than likely kill 2 Guardsmen. The odds are in your favor that the opponent's going to fail both of those 5 saves. Each one of those Guardsmen is worth about 6.5 points. So your little 5-point upgrade has just killed 13 points of enemy units with its auto wounds alone. If you're facing off against Kazakin, the odds are that your opponent will fail 1 of 2 of those auto wounds you've done on him. That's another 10 points killed by your 5-point weapon. You see, the great thing about Stubbers is they look like they're not a great investment, but they're so cheap that they only typically need to kill 1 thing and they were worth it. And the great thing about heavy Stubbers is there's no law of diminishing returns. The more of these things you stick into your army, the more extra auto wounds that they do. So let's say you've taken 4 Leman Russ in your force. It's a pretty average amount for most Guard players. If you put a heavy Stubber on each one, you're looking at 8 auto wounds generated over the course of a game. Against their intended target, like light infantry, you are looking at killing 5 or 6 enemy infantry each game, just with these Stubbers. And the Stubbers have cost you 20 points to include in your army, and they've killed between 30 and 40 points of enemy units. It's just a really, really good way of just adding a bit of extra anti-infantry firepower to your force. And when you begin to achieve this critical mass of Stubbers, you can start threatening other units as well. For example, they're not great into marine or marine equivalent. Power armor is fairly effective at shrugging off bolter and other small arms fire, but if you put 8 auto wounds onto an intercessor or intercessor equivalent unit over the course of a game, that is going to result in a dead intercessor and change. You might even do 3 wounds to the enemy unit. Now, your Stubbers have cost you about 20 points. And if you've killed a space between intercessor and done an extra wound, you've at least broken even. And again, we're only talking about the auto wounds. We're not even taking into account the fact that the Stubbers each game will fire 12 shots and they'll get 2 auto wounds, but they'll also get 4 normal wounds as well. Against light infantry, that's going to translate into 2 or 3 extra wounds each game, and against marine equivalent, you're looking at an extra 1 to 2 wounds, which over the course of the game with many Stubbers is going to result in you picking up an extra few infantry here and there, which just increases the efficiency of the weapons even further. And if the non-auto wounds manage to allow you to kill an extra intercessor, then suddenly you've not broken even on these little machine guns. You've actually doubled your investment, your return on your investment. And what's kind of insane is this equation, this number of points you spend for number of points you kill, number of auto wounds you do, still works against infantry that the Stubber really is not traditionally very good against. So for example, let's take a look at very heavy infantry or super heavy infantry such as Terminators and Custodes. Starting off with the Terminators, you're looking at being able to get about 7 to 8 heavy Stubbers for each Terminator model. That's because some Terminators are a little bit cheaper, like the Deathwing ones, I believe, about 33 points, and then the Death Guard ones are like 40 points. So let's say on average you get between 7 and 8 heavy Stubbers. Now on the auto wounds alone, you're looking at 14 to 16 auto wounds there. That's a dead Terminator. So you've broken even. Again, already you've broken even. Just on the auto wounds. If you're facing off against like normal Terminators, and you can then also generate an extra 2 wounds per Stubber over the course of the game, because you'll get 6 hits, 2 will be auto wounds, 4 will be normal wounds, and then strength 4 versus toughness 4 on Terminators, that's the 2 wounds. Suddenly you're not looking at 14 to 16 auto wounds. You're looking at, in total, 28 to 32 wounds from these Stubbers. That is more than enough to kill a couple of Terminators, and you have once again not made your points back. You've not broken even. Once again, you have smashed it. You have got double your points back on your Stubbers from killing Terminators. They're not even designed to kill Terminators, and they can still do it. But wait, there's more, because if you were just to take those Stubbers we've talked about right now, just take those 8 Stubbers, and you were to put them into something like an Imperial Knight, from the auto wounds alone, you would take off 5 wounds from a Knight. That's bonkers. You can take off 20% of the wounds from a Knight by just sticking a heavy Stubber on the vehicles you were taking anyway, and it's only going to cost you like 40 points to do so. And what's amazing about this whole analysis and the ridiculousness that is the heavy Stubber is we've actually been downplaying its effectiveness, because we've not even taken into account the fact that most tanks in the Guard Army have easy access to reroll 1s to hit. So you actually have even more opportunities to generate extra auto wounds from each Stubber over the course of the game, which will further increase their damage output. We've not even taken into account things like ingrained precision, which will allow your Stubbers to auto wound the enemy on 5s, doubling their auto wound effectiveness. Now, you're unlikely to use that on, let's say, a single Stubber on a Lehman Russ, but what other vehicles do we have that have easy access to Stubbers? Oh, that's right, the goddamn Rogel Dawn can rock 3 of the bloody things. So you're more than likely going to be slapping on the 4 rerolls to hit from the Lord Solar, and then you're going to be slapping on ingrained precision. The amount of Stubber auto wounds that one vehicle is going to generate over the course of the game is insane. Now, hopefully that has convinced all of our logical numbers guys out there of the supremacy of the mighty Stubber. But I know there are going to be a few other questions surrounding this weapon. Firstly, in fact, one of the most common questions I get when I start talking about pintle weapons is, should I take Stubbers or should I take Stormbolters? Now, the Stormbolter is a pintle weapon like the Stubber, and it's basically the same as you find on the Space Marine Stormbolters. It's rapid fire 2, which means at 24-inch range it fires 2 shots, but at close range, at 12-inch range, it's going to fire 4 shots, which is actually more than the Stubber. So in theory, Stormbolter, if it's in rapid fire range from the get-go, will actually generate more auto wounds than the Stubber. The thing is, there's theory and then there's reality. And in my personal experience, the Stormbolter rarely gets to fire 4 shots because most of the Russes are further back, pounding the enemy with those long-range guns. And I personally think that the range of the Stubber greatly complements the other weapons that you're likely to take on a Lehman Russ, such as a heavy bolter, las cannon, or an executioner plasma cannon. Another one I get is, should I be taking armored tracks or pintle weapons on my vehicles? And honestly, you should be taking the Stubber or other pintle weapons way before you take armored tracks. The problem I have with armored tracks is they're not always on. You see, if your vehicle doesn't get shot at for a turn, the armor tracks haven't done their job. If your vehicle doesn't get shot at over the course of the game, you've literally spent 5 points on an upgrade which has done nothing. You're relying upon your opponent's decisions for your upgrades to become relevant. But with the Stubber, you don't care what your opponent does. You get to shoot it. It's going to have more opportunities to be an active upgrade, unlike the armor tracks, which I tend to find are a much more passive upgrade. Also, there is the simple fact that the Lehman Russ is a big old tank. It's kind of immune to most small arms anyway. I mean, sure, when you get down to those last 1 or 2 wounds, maybe you'd be grateful if you took armor tracks, but it's a situational scenario. It's not something that comes up very often, and I tend to find that the toughness 8 and the 2+8 of the Russ is more than enough to fend off most damage 1 weapons. But I guess the really big question that people have is, how many Stubbers should I be taking, and should I be prioritizing them over other upgrades I can take in my force? Now, I don't have a definitive number of Stubbers you should be taking, but I do have 2 pieces of advice, 2 approaches you can adopt when it comes to including these weapons in your force. The first one is you build your army normally, and if you get to the end of the army building process, the end of the army list, and you're like, okay, I've got 20 points left over, I don't really have anything else I can spend them on, that's not quite enough for me to include another unit, you know what? I'll slap some upgrades on. That's when you go, right, Stubbers, they are the first priority. I'm going to put a stubber on every Lehman Russ. I'm going to take 4 Stubbers in my army. That's the most common way of including Stubbers in your army. And that's probably the approach I'd recommend for a lot of new players. If you find yourself with a few points left over, don't bother putting that power fist on that officer. He's never going to use it. Don't bother giving that sergeant a plasma pistol. He's never going to use it. Anything like that, don't bother with. Stubbers are a great upgrade, and they're a great way of spending those last few points and actually contributing significant damage output to your list. The other approach is to go all in on the machine guns. From the very beginning, you're like, I am taking every vehicle with one of these things. They are going to be an active ingredient in my list damage output. They will be part of my game plan. I will be factoring them in to how much damage I can do each turn. Now, I actually have run both these approaches many times, and they are both equally valid. When I'm running my Mordian Iron Guard, when I'm running a more hybrid force, I tend to go for the, you know what, I'll add a few Stubbers in here and there at the end if I've got nowhere else to spend the points. When I'm running my Armageddon Steel Legion, which are my purely mechanized force, every vehicle gets a stubber. I've got 6 of my Chimeras, I've got 6 of my Lehman Russes, and I include them on every vehicle that I can, because I'm already taking those vehicles, and the job of those vehicles in my army is to be the damage output. The infantry is there to just sit safely in the Chimeras and jump out onto the objective when the coast is clear. And anything I can do to clear that coast even more, even quicker, is something I want to be doing. So it depends on what kind of list you're taking. If you're taking a lot of mechanized units already, and your focus is going to be on the motor pool, on the armored core, then start slapping those Stubbers in from the beginning. All you're doing is boosting your damage output. That's fantastic. But if you're taking a more hybrid force that's going to have other sources of damage output like Kazakin, Scions, Rogel, Dawns, Mortars, then that's when you're like, right, these Stubbers are more the afterthought. They are the seasoning to my list because I've already got units that are kind of focusing on the damage output, and these things are just a little bit extra to sprinkle on top. But at the end of the day, maybe I'm just a Stubber fanboy. Maybe all of this is just my misguided opinion. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Are you a loyal follower of the cult of Stubber, or are you a Stormbolter heretic? Let me know what you're thinking down in that comment section. If you've enjoyed today's video, please make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. And if you found today's video particularly interesting, informative, or fun, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. By becoming a supporter, you will gain access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community of over 1,000 active members. It's really exploded over the last 6 months, and there's always something to talk about in the MG Discord. We've got a tactics section, army lists, painting, hobbying, and we've even got a pretty spicy meme channel as well. And I just want to take a moment to say a big thank you to all of the latest supporters. So thank you to Brother of Titans, Philip C, Riley S, Anthony, David, Drake, Jeff, Polar Man, Chris J, Sebastian, Giorgio, Alex Demars, Lorenzo, and Agent Flint. Thank you guys for doing your part. Thank you for becoming channel members. I also want to do a shout out to the latest Patreon supporters as well. So a big old thank you to Philip PK, Ebola, Steely, David J. Kelly, and Colonel E111. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bonbon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ridemaster 134-1, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Diesel Fox, and of course, August Varney. Thank you guys. Your generous support makes a huge difference. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.